All right. Well, I had this teacher once. He was my Old Testament seminary professor. And we were going through the Old Testament. It was a crazy class. It was called Genesis to Song of Solomon. That's a lot for one semester. And we were just reading through just like a F-16 journey through Genesis to Song of Solomon. And when he got to the book of Esther, he told us that he had been to Jerusalem for the Feast of Purim. Now, the Feast of Purim is when they get together and celebrate what we read about in the book of Esther. How there was this guy, Haman, who wanted to wipe out the whole Jewish race. But there was Esther and there was Mordecai, and God delivered them through it. And so they don't call the book Esther. They call it, I think it's something like Megizzo or something like that, which means scroll. They get together in these huge parties, and they read through the book of Esther together. But the rabbis in the teachings would say, here's the deal, though. You've got to have a lot of food, a lot of strong drink, a lot of celebration when you read it. And so that's how they would go through the book of Esther. And the guy who was teaching our class was there, and he came to just experience what it was like to be at a Feast of Purim in Jerusalem. And they started reading through it. And whenever they get to the word Haman, everybody brings noisemakers. Haman's the guy who's trying to kill all the Jews. And they bring noisemakers, and when Haman's name is mentioned, they're all like, boo! They start spinning their noisemakers, and they just go nuts. And then whenever they get to, for us, Esther is the hero, but for a Jewish mind, it's Mordecai. And when Mordecai's name is mentioned, they go ballistic. Mordecai! Woo-hoo! And they pass strong drinks around. And my teacher was a pastor from a conservative Baptist denomination. And so he was like, oh, what are we doing? Are we supposed to do this while we read through this story? And he said the story just got louder and crazier as they went through this entire book of Esther. It was a loud version. Now, I don't care much for strong drink, but I thought that would be fun to experience reading the Bible that way, where everybody's getting into it, where they're booing the bad guy, cheering for the heroes of the story that are standing up for the Lord. And especially since you guys are all the youth, our children's ministry are here with us this morning, we're going to try to read 1 Samuel 20 like that. Okay? So you're going to need to, at times when the bad guy does something bad or even just looks at you, I want you to boo him. I didn't tell you to bring noisemakers, but just be ready to boo. And when we have two heroes really in 1 Samuel chapter 20, and when they come out and when they do something good, we're going to cheer for them. All right? So we're going to get into this story. Everybody's in 1 Samuel chapter 20. And let me introduce to you our characters in the story of 1 Samuel chapter 20. Roy, you ready for this? Ladies and gentlemen, harp playing, lion killing, rock slinging, give it up for God's future king, David. Now, to fight an enemy, he'd climb a hill. Even though asked, David's blood he would not spill. His dad, the king, is seriously ill. Give it up for Jonathan. This guy's not as nice. He makes oaths he doesn't keep. He lies and he cheats. He throws spears at his own peeps. The royal king, King Saul. Now, listen, before we read 1 Samuel chapter 20, we're going to rewind a little bit. There's some important things that have happened before, so let's rewind these guys, rewind back a little bit to when Jonathan was standing by his dad. And he said to his dad, the king, King Saul, yell it.
Why are you trying to kill David? All he's ever done is benefit you.
As surely as the Lord lives, I will not have David killed. Oh, you see that?
Yet Saul's oath was a lie. He threw a spear at David. Ugh. Twice. Pump it up. Oh. And then he threw it at him. Or he did. He sent not one, not two, but 3 teams to kill David. And then he went himself. But God saved David each time.
Thank you, Lord.
And so we come to 1 Samuel chapter 20. And you can read along as we go through this story. And every once in a while, these guys are going to act for us. David fled from Naioth at Ramah. And he went to Jonathan. And he asked Jonathan,
"What did I do to make your dad want to kill me?"
and Jonathan replied,
My dad does not want to kill you. Everything that he does, big or small, I eventually find out.
but David took an oath and said, "Your father knows very well that I found favor in your eyes." And he has said to himself, "Jonathan must not know this, or he'll be grieved. He's not telling you." But then David said,
Oh, I'm like so close to death, and the only thing that's keeping me from it is God himself.
so Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you want me to do, I will do for you." So David said, "Okay, here's the plan. Tomorrow is the new moon feast. I'm supposed to dine with your king, your dad. But let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, tell him David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. And if he says, 'Very well,' then your servant is safe. I'll know I'm safe. But if he loses his temper, if your dad loses his temper, if King Saul loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord." And then he said to Jonathan,
If I'm guilty of sin and I deserve death, then kill me yourself. Don't send me to your dad.
Never. Dude, if I even had a hint that my dad was trying to kill you, wouldn't I tell you?
"Who will tell me?" And David asked, "Who will tell me?"
Who's going to tell me if your father answers harshly?
All right, let's freeze these guys. Because in the next parts, I want to tell you what the plan is that they come up with. They come up with a 2-part plan. Part number 1 is Operation Dinner. Turn to the person next to you and say, "Operation Dinner." Operation Dinner. Jonathan and David make a plan. In verse 13 and verse 12 through 15, they make a plan. Jonathan's going to go to dinner with King Saul. And while they're eating, David's not going to be there, even though he's a member of the family. And here's the plan at Operation Dinner. If King Saul is okay with this, Jonathan knows it's safe to bring David back home. But if King Saul freaks out, then Jonathan is going to try to go get word to David to get him out of there, to have him run. That's part 1, Operation Dinner. Say it again. But then there's the next part to the plan. How are they going to share this with each other? That's part 2. It's called Operation Code Words. Say it to the person next to you. The plan they come up with is Jonathan is going to shoot an arrow out into the field where David is hiding. And the plan that they work out together is when they shoot the arrow out, if Jonathan says to his servant, "Go get that arrow. It's just right there." That's code word for David to say, "Oh, it's safe. I can come out." But if Jonathan shoots the arrow and says to his servant, "No, it's way out. It's beyond you. You need to go get it. Quickly, run for it." That's code word for David, not that subtle. To run for it, because my dad's trying to kill you. King Saul is trying to kill you. So first part is Operation what? And the second part is Operation. All right, let's see how this plays out. So David went out and hid in the field. And he found a big ugly rock to hide behind. And when the new moon feast came, it happened every month, the harvest feast, when the new moon feast came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall, opposite Jonathan. And Abner was there. He sat next to Saul. But David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought to himself,
ceremonial, unclean, the dirty little rat.
But the next day, the second day of this feast, David's place was empty again. And Saul said to his son Jonathan,
"Why has the son of Jesse not come to my dinner either yesterday or today?"
And Jonathan answered him. Jonathan made up a story about his family observing a sacrifice in the town, and his brother ordering him to come home. And that David had said, "If you find favor in my eyes, let me go." And Jonathan said, "I let him go." And Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan. And he said to him, "You son of a perverse and rebellious woman." I want to tell you that the NIV has cleaned that up for us. If we had the Hebrew, we'd definitely be PG-13. "Don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established." And then he said,
"Go and get him and bring him to me, because he must die."
And Jonathan stood up and said, Jonathan asked his father, but Saul hurled his spear at him now to kill him, where he had left it earlier. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. I'm at verse 34 now. Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger on that second day of the feast. He did not eat because he was grieved at the shameful treatment of David. How many of you would lose your appetite if your dad tried to kill you during dinner? Okay. That's what happens to Jonathan. He loses his appetite. In the morning, that was Operation Dinner. Now we're going to Operation Code Word. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for his meeting with David. Come on over here, young man, Jonathan. Stand up here. He said to the boy, now, that's exactly what he said. Good job. I hope nobody gets, okay, everybody guard your eyes. He pulled his bow and arrow back and he shot it out into the field of really weird-looking wheat. Now the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, and he found it. And Jonathan called out to him and said, so the boy picked up the arrow and returned to his master. Verse 39 says, the boy knew nothing about Operation Code Word. Only Jonathan and David knew. Jonathan gave him his weapons and said, go carry them back to town. And after the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of that ugly stone. Just kidding, buddy. And he bowed down before Jonathan 3 times. Kids, help me out. 1, 2, 3. Jonathan went out, snuck out to say goodbye to him. And then they kissed each other. Gross! All right. Now, if we were in France, this would be okay. You know, in France, even friends, they go, oh, I love you, right? When I was in the Philippines, they did this really cool thing for old men or pastors. Kids will come up to a pastor or to an old man, and they'll go to shake his hand, and then they'll take his hand, they'll put it on their forehead. And then they'll walk away. It's really, really cool. I heard about a tribe in Africa that when a new baby's born into their tribe, they all come up, and they, to bless it, they spit on the child. So every culture is a little different. In our culture, it would be a little weird for David and Jonathan to kiss goodbye. So let's let them do a bro hug. They wept together. David wept the most. Verse 42, and Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we've sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between you and me, between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" And then David left, and Jonathan went back to the town. And these two friends, they almost never see each other again. They're going to see each other one more time. These two guys that were just committed and devoted to each other just get to see each other one more time. In your bulletin, I called this titled this sermon, "A Friendship to Behold." And I think it is. The word behold means that we look on it and we gaze on it and we try to learn from it. And that's just what I want us to do here at the end. It's a friendship for us to look at and behold and learn from. What do we learn from this friendship? The first thing I think we learn is this friendship between Jonathan and David. The first thing we learn is that Jonathan, especially as we watch him, he's willing to give up his own privileges for another person. Jonathan was the prince, right? That means he's the next king. But he's willing to give that up for his friend David. Jonathan could just lay back and let his dad do a bunch of crazy stuff, but he decides to step in and stand up, and he puts his own life in the line of fire of a spear, really, for his friend. He's willing to sacrifice for another person. I want to show you a verse. It happens the only other time that they see each other before Jonathan and Saul die is in 1 Samuel 23. I want to show you one verse. This is the quick thing that they get to see each other when King Saul is hunting David down out in the desert, in the wilderness. Jonathan runs up to David and says, "Don't be afraid. My father will not lay a hand on you." What he means is, over my dead body. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. Listen to Jonathan, man. He's willing to give up his rights. He's willing to put his own life on the line for David. He's willing to sacrifice. And that's the thing I want us to behold, think about. In what ways do I sacrifice of myself for other people, for my friends? What ways do I sacrifice and give up my own rights and privileges just for other human beings? In what ways am I doing that? There's a way to help somebody that really doesn't cost me anything, right? Like if I have clothes that I don't want anymore, and I give them to Goodwill, I'm just happy to get rid of them, right? That's not really a sacrifice to me. There's no sacrifice. I'm not putting my life at risk, even though it's a good thing to do. It's not like Jonathan. It's not a sacrifice or putting my own comforts in life at risk or giving up my time. It costs me something. If I just give a couple dollars to a cause, ultimately, that's not a big deal. It's not going to kill me. But what Jonathan did is he went all out. I've told you the story of Paulina before, but I'm going to tell you again. I was on a missions team that went down to Mexico. We met Paulina, and she was a single mom with 2 kids living in this shack made out of crates. And we were on a team to build her a house. We had come to build her a house. And in 3 days, we built her a house. And during this time, she became a believer. And it was really cool. We built her this house, and we left. The next year that we came down, we went to see her and spend time with her. And I remember we walked up, and she was like, "My Amor family," except she didn't speak any English. And she would run out, and she would just hug us, and she was weeping. And she was so happy to see us, and we were so happy to see her, and she took us on a tour. She had painted her house, and she had put verses on the inner walls. Actually, there were no inner walls when we left, and she had built some inner walls and wrote verses on there. And then we left again. We came back the next year to spend time with her again. And we walked up, and she's like, "Woo, my Amor family." She came running out to us and gave us hugs. And she goes, "I'm so excited you're here. I want to show you something." And she was just really excited about this. And she said, "Come on." And so she takes us around back by the house that we had built for her. She had a couple guys there. They were sawing things, and they were putting these pallets. They were hammering these pallets together. And in the front yard of the house, there was this lady just standing there like this, very quietly, that we'd never seen before. And here's what she said. Paulina goes, did you see that lady in my yard? I'm building her a house. I'm like, what? She goes, God has so blessed me. I'm going to bless somebody else. And so she's putting up a house on her property. I got to tell you, I've never put up a house on my property. But I watched Paulina, who had so close to nothing, give everything she had, make a sacrifice for somebody else. And I learned a lot from her about what it means to give and care and put my life aside for somebody else. Maybe just another human being. Our youth group, where's the youth group? Put your hand up real quick. I don't know if you know, maybe you guys have already started to talk about next month, these guys are going to do the 30-hour famine. They're going to start the 30-hour famine. Do you know right now about 24,000 kids die from hunger every day? Not every month or every week, but every day. About one every time we breathe, a kid between the ages of 0 to 5 dies from hunger and hunger-related causes, and that shouldn't be. And these youth are not only going to try to do something about it, but to do it, they're going to get sponsors and go without food themselves for 30 hours. They're going to make their own sacrifice. It might not be much for some parts of the world, but they know it's like, okay, I don't get to eat for 30 hours, but I'm doing this to help save lives. And they're going to make a sacrifice for that. That's what Jonathan is like, willing to sacrifice from his own life, his privileges. There's a second thing I want us to behold about this friendship. Loyal to the very end. These guys were committed to each other, devoted to the very end. When people get married, what do they make a vow about? Right? In sickness and in health. Whether richer or poorer. In good and in bad. I'm staying committed to you. I will be faithful to you. It's a huge commitment, isn't it? And sometimes I know some of you have walked through hard times where one has bailed on that faithfulness. But you know what? These relationships can be faithful to the end. It can be faithful to the end. Friendships can be faithful to the end. Relationships can be faithful to the end. I want to show you something that we read in this story. In 1 Samuel 20, verse 13 through 15, Jonathan says something weird to David. He says, may the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. In other words, God made King Saul king. And he tells David, may God be with you in that same way. But show me unfailing kindness like the Lord's kindness as long as I live, so that I may not be killed, and do not ever cut off your kindness from my family. Jonathan asked David, please don't kill me and don't kill my kids when you become king. That's really what he's saying. It's kind of weird. But if we lived in that culture, we'd know when you had one king from a family, and this new king came from a different family, what did the new king do every time in ancient cultures? They would wipe that king's family out completely. Make sure nobody would be left to try to reclaim the throne. And Jonathan knows this, and so he tells David, hey, I know you're going to be king, and I'm supporting you. Let's just make a covenant, though, that you won't kill me and you won't kill my kids when you become king, because I'm going to be second to you. He promises this, but now I want you to see something that happens many years later, after Saul and Jonathan both die. It happens in 2 Samuel chapter 9. The king, and in 2 Samuel we're now talking about David, not Saul. The king David asked, is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness? Why is he asking this? Because he promised it. Him and Jonathan had a commitment. I will show kindness to your family forever. Ziba answered the king. Ziba was a servant. There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet. I could just think that this was a dramatic moment. That David said, wait, what'd you say? Did you say there's still a son of Jonathan? Ziba makes sure to tell him that he was lame in both feet. Where's Gavin? Gavin, are you here? Where's Gavin Butler? Is he here? Gavin Butler, come up here real quick. Come on up to the stage. You probably didn't know I was going to call you up, did you? The other day, I saw him do this. I thought it was kind of cool, so it just came to my mind. Do you know how you lift yourself up? Your whole body while you're sitting down? Can you do that for me? Just like sit down and then lift yourself up. Yeah, and then I want you to, with your hands, walk over to where I am. Yeah, just try it. All right, so he just kind of does this. Check this out. You know, this is the life of Jonathan's son because he was crippled, because he was lame, and there were no wheelchairs. And I wanted you to see that because of what happens next. You tired? Good work. Thank you. Ziba, the servant, I could have done that, but I wanted Gavin to have a chance to do it. Ziba answered, listen, he's at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lo-debar. So King David had him brought before Lo-debar from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. And when Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, Mephibosheth, try saying that, Mephibosheth. Is anybody else named Mephibosheth? I didn't think anybody's name. They don't use that name very often. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, Mephibosheth. At your service, he replied. Don't be afraid, David said to him. Why does David say don't be afraid? Because I'm sure what's going through Mephibosheth's mind. This is it for me. This is it. I'm done. New king's family. I'm from the old king's family. It's over. I love this passage right here. This is cool. David said to him, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father, Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. And Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant, that you should notice a dead dog like me? Mephibosheth considers himself a dead dog. Dog was the highest of insults. Mephibosheth doesn't even bother calling himself a dog. He calls himself, I'm a dead dog. He had a hard life, you know. I don't know what David answered him. But I bet it was something like, oh no, you are no dead dog. You are the son of my friend, Jonathan. And you are going to eat at my table all the days of your life. So cool. So cool. He just calls him out. He says, I'm going to take care of you all the days of my life because I made a commitment to your dad. So you're always going to eat at my table. I think I'm so broken up because we're like Mephibosheth, aren't we? One day we're going to come before God the Father. And if you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, God the Father is going to go, enter heaven. You will eat at my table all the days of your life. And we're going to be like, why would you show kindness to a dead dog like me? I'm a sinner. And I don't know really what's said, but I think it's something like the Father would go, oh no, you are no dead dog. You belong to my son. And I promised my son that nobody, he wouldn't lose any of his. I told my son, none. None of the sheep that are yours, I will lose. And so, we get to enter like Mephibosheth. Man, that happened this week. This is Easter week. This is good news, isn't it? That we get this gift. That we get this reconciliation with the Father because we know his Son, Jesus. He's our Savior. It's good news to share. Man, I hope you spread it. This when you leave, I think today when you leave, the ushers have invitations to come back for Easter service next week. Take one and invite somebody. This is good news to share. It's amazing what Jesus has done for us. And 1 John chapter 3 says this. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our life for our brothers and sisters. And if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? As we behold the friendship of David and Jonathan, it should cause us to go, am I sacrificing for my fellow humans? Am I caring about them? Am I devoted to them? Am I willing to give up my own stuff to help them? In one of the commentaries I read this week, it said this about chapter 20. The loyalty illustrated in 1 Samuel chapter 20 provides a basis for our understanding of such commitment to our fellow human beings. As David and Jonathan were faithful in their responsibilities to each other, so may today's church, may Hope Community Church, be faithful in her responsibilities to the world. As we look at their friendship, may we know we got a great responsibility to share the gospel, to share everything for our fellow human beings. You know, this is really cool. I love what I'm about to show you. I'm about to show you a video. Next week, as you know, I've been talking about it. Whatever offering we get, we're sending to the Philippines to Pastor Wilson so kids can go to high school. I've been telling you about the Aida children. They're a very poor people group. Pastor Wilson, the Philippines, been reaching out to them. Last Easter, what did we do? We built them a fish farm. And part of this video, he's standing in front of the fish farm. And he's going to introduce you to some of the kids. So let's see this. Take a look.
Maria. I would like to be a midwife someday.
Hi, I'm Edwin Melissa. I'm second year high school. My dream is to be a policeman and serve the Lord.
Victoria. My dream is to be a teacher and culinary and serve the Lord. Pamilya, I'm going year high school. My dream is to be a teacher someday and serve the Lord. Hi, I'm Dina Antonio. I'm third year high school. My dream is to be a teacher and serve the Lord.
Good afternoon. Here are some of our high school students here at To God Be the Glory Christian Academy. They are also staying here at the Aita Children's Home. And we are here now. And thank you very much for the fish fund that you have so graciously donated to the Aita Children's Home. And now we are praying for sponsors of these high school students. And they are staying here now, but they do not have sponsors yet. And we need sponsors so that they can continue to study in high school. And the sponsorship program is needed in order that we can hire new teachers, and also so that we can provide the needs of these high school students as they stay in the children's home and study in the Christian school. We appeal for your sense of love and generosity toward these Aita high school students. Thank you very much, brothers and sisters at Hope Community Church. God bless you. God bless you richly and mightily. To God be the glory.
Let my life